A friend of mine, and you know who you are, once said, "There's a lot of silly that goes around." Truer words were never spoken. And we live in a time when there is an overabundance of silly making its way around. But then again, I think silly has been going around for a very long time. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas. And this is your daily devotional for Friday, January 9th, 2026. Paul spent a lot of time correcting the silly. Read his letters carefully, and they are almost completely given over to confronting one error or another that had taken root in one of his churches. He sometimes calls the errors by name, but more often he simply assumes his readers know exactly what he's talking about, so he doesn't always describe the errors in detail for us. Instead, he gets pretty quickly to talking about the truth in an effort to correct the error. And then he almost always talks about how to live a faithful Christian life in light of his teachings. In Ephesians, the error seems to have been the common problem of following false teachings. Now, there is some evidence that the letter to the Ephesians began its life as a circular letter. That is, a letter not written to only one congregation, but a letter meant to be circulated among several congregations. But whether it was written to one congregation or several, the situation remained the same. The Christian faith was still in its infancy, and many of the tenets of the faith that we take for granted had not yet come fully into focus. In the meantime, there were itinerant Christian preachers who traveled from town to town to proclaim the gospel. Paul was one such preacher. As you might imagine, with different preachers coming through each town on a regular basis, and with the beliefs of the church still slowly coming into focus, there was a lot of variation in the way different preachers explained the gospel. And of course, they couldn't all be right. That's why Paul frequently had to correct what he saw as errors that kept popping up in different congregations. In today's reading, Paul is explaining the essential unity of the church that is expressed in different people having different gifts. You can easily imagine that some preachers had come through town claiming that everyone had to be identical in their walks of faith. So Paul talks here about how Christ has given different gifts to different people. Some gifted for preaching, some gifted for teaching, some gifted for evangelism. His point is that unity doesn't mean uniformity. If this sounds familiar, it is because Paul says much the same thing in 1 Corinthians 12, where he talks about a variety of gifts. But what Paul says in Ephesians is striking. Listen to what he says now. We must no longer be children, tossed to and fro and blown about by every wind of doctrine, by people's trickery, by their craftiness in deceitful scheming. But speaking the truth in love, we must grow up in every way into Him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and knit together by every ligament with which it is equipped, as each part is working properly, promotes the body's growth in building itself up in love. It's pretty easy to read between the lines here. Different preachers had come to town, some preaching sound doctrine, others preaching a sort of distorted gospel. Now, among newer Christians, this could be a problem. They would not have had enough history with the faith to distinguish between sound doctrine and false. As a result, they were likely to be blown about by every wind of doctrine. So Paul encourages them to grow into a more mature form of Christianity, one in which they could more easily tell the difference between sound and, shall we say, squirrely teaching. What is striking here is how he ties the call to a more mature brand of Christian faith with the description of a community built on love. How can you tell sound teaching from unsound? Easy. Sound teaching builds up the body. Unsound teaching tears it down. Sound teaching seeks to unite believers. Unsound teaching seeks to divide. So Here's where the silly comes into play. Even today, the church is confronted by people who want to use the church to divide people from one another. Stand with us, they say, and we'll help you tell who the good people are and who the evil people are. And as it turns out, the good people always seem to be the ones who agree with everything the speaker says, and the evil people are always the ones who disagree, even just a little. There's an interesting passage from the Gospel of John where Philip tells his friend Nathanael that he's found the promised Messiah. But when Nathanael responds with the snarky question, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip doesn't try to argue with him. He simply offers an invitation. Come and see. Turns out, love doesn't divide. It doesn't argue. It doesn't mistake unity with uniformity. It does not insist that everyone walk the faith in exactly the same way. Its unity is in the one whose greatest command is to love one another. Now may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.